In the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful, welcome to another session of Finding God. Pardon my voice, my nose, my throat are not at the best of their capacity. I'm slightly unwell, but this has to continue regardless of whatever health minor obstacles I'm facing. And I'll be much better by the grace of God and by my parents' prayers very, very quickly. Um, Today we're going to start Surah Al-Waqi'ah, which is the 46th in terms of revelation, according to the Nordic and Tanzil.net. And we'll cover around half of it till verse 39. And then next week we'll go on from verse 40 till verse 96. Verse 39 is important because the chapter is divided into a few sections. First, it talks about the coming of the day of judgment, which is inevitable, some of its terrors, the separation of men into different classes. By men, it means human beings. Uh, and then the joys of heaven described in Islam to Muslims, and then the punishment of the wicked. Then discussion about resurrection, and then just how God wraps up in his beautiful poetry. Um, but today we'll only talk until the beautiful part, the right hand, the paradise, and everything. And I'll take a bit of a deep dive into the topic of Hur, which incorrectly in the English language has been translated into uh, virgin or damsel or so many things. But when we get to that, that's verse number 22. But I'll finish the first section and then I'll come back to it because there's something uh, that we can further discuss, particularly with regards to the 72 virgins thing that is prevalent in the politicization of Islam in the West. But I'll start. Surah Al-Waqi'ah, the event, in the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful. When the event befalls, here, the event refers to the day of resurrection, and there can be no denial of its befalling, bringing low some of those who will enter hell, exalting others who will enter paradise. So, first three verses. When the event befalls, and there can be no denial of its befalling, bringing low and exalting others. So it's setting a context. Yes, for those of you wondering, this is a stroller, or stola as it's called, I can't remember. I use it as a scarf. I don't know if I'm wearing it right, but I enjoy wearing it this way, so that'll be the end of it. When the earth will be shaken with a terrible shake. Now, this is also mentioned in Surah Zalzal, which is one of my favorite chapters, that the earth will shake and it will open up. And here it says, when the earth will be shaken with a terrible shake, and the mountains will be powdered to dust, so that they will become floating dust particles. And you all will be in three groups. Before we get to the groups, this imagery is insane. Today I was talking to my elder brother about chapter 3 in terms of Revelation, Surah Muzammil, where it talks, or was it Surah Mudassir? One of the chapters in the initial few weeks, if you recall, where God talks about wrapping up the sun. And I went in, I took a bit of a deep dive into it because the sun is never something we think of being wrapped. And I gave the example of a light bulb. You take a light bulb and you wrap a cloth around it. That's how it's all about scale and imagery. Um, so that was very important. Here as well, the earth will shake is something we can imagine, but mountains will be powdered to dust. Mountains will be powdered to dust so that they will become floating dust particles. And you all will be in three groups. So those on the right hand, those who will be given their records in their right hands. How fortunate will be those on the right hand. as a respect for them, because they will enter paradise. And those on the left hand, which is those who will be given their record in the left hand, how unfortunate will be those on the left hand, as a disgrace for them, because they will enter hell. And those foremost in Islamic faith of monotheism and in performing righteous deeds in the life of this world, on the very first call to embrace Islam, will be foremost in paradise. There's a foremost group at the front, which has done the requirements that were expected of them. Then there are those on the right hand, then there are those on the left hand. There are three groups. Of those three groups, two are going to heaven, one is going to hell. That's the distinction. In the foremost group, I wonder who is included as part of it. Because you can say that it's the holy prophets, the friends of prophets, loyal family members, all these great, revered human beings of the past who we value and follow. So Moses, Noah, Muhammad, Jesus, Mary, Khadija, Fatma, Ali, all these great human beings. But I somehow feel that this is a group that we can be part of too. Obviously, it's a lot of hard work, but I don't think this group is only exclusive to those who are born with a certain distinction and God gave them a huge task to look after. I believe even today, people who exist 1400 years after Islam, even today, they are able to be part of the group that is foremost. By being pious, by following God's teachings, by loving their fellow man and woman, by being a great human being and a great global citizen, I believe that could actually happen. These foremost will be the nearest to God. I believe that proximity still exists. I don't believe that it was reserved only for Muhammad, Moses, Jesus, Noah. I don't believe it was Adam. Because if that were the case, then that means I'm made of a lower stock than those people. That means I should only try to be mediocre because I'm mediocre. No, I don't believe that. I never believe that. I believe God imbues each human being with the same capacity for greatness, for proximity towards God, proximity with God. And that is where we must strive. That is where we must go towards God in order to do that. In the gardens of delight, which is paradise, a multitude of those foremost will be from the first generations who embraced Islam. And a few of those foremost will be from the later generations. They will be on thrones woven with gold and precious stones, reclining thereon face to face. See? From later generations as well. Many from the foremost, but also the later ones. That is exactly the point I'm making. So there is a narrative in Muslim countries where Muslims believe, oh, I am a sinner. Oh, everything I do is a sin. I am only grateful that God is ultimate in his mercy and forgiveness, because otherwise whatever I do is sin. No, sir. I disagree with this self-immolation. I disagree with this constant critique of the self. I promote championing of values that have come from God. There is humility, and then there is self-pity, self-immolation. No to the latter, yes to the former. Be humble. Don't say, oh, the sun shines for me and the moon, and I am who the universe revolves around. Don't say that. But also don't say, oh, I am incapable of doing anything positive. Anything positive that comes out of me isn't because of me, it is because of God. No, you are taking away your agency. Now, that means all the good deeds you do are not done responsibly. They're done through you. Then what are you? Then you're a vessel of nothingness. No. If you, I refute this point and I oppose it, because if you're a vessel of nothingness, you can't be held responsible for anything. You're merely acting out of what God had decreed. You had no thought of your own. No, sir. No, man. You always have your own mind guiding you. You always have your own choices and decisions, which you rightfully or wrongfully take, which you consider are better or worse for you. You always have that. So you can't say, oh, yeah, I'm just a natural sinner. No, you are naturally neutral. Sins feel good. Adultery, drinking, smoking, partying, wasting time, stealing, lying, they feel good because they're sinful. They're meant to feel good. If good things felt good, then everybody would do them and then they wouldn't be good anymore because you won't achieve them. Sin doesn't need to be achieved, sin is there to be committed. It's righteous deeds which need to be achieved. That's why they're righteous, that's why they're there in the first place. So I never championed the narrative that we're fundamentally flawed as human beings. No. We are neutral. We have choice. We have animal urges. That is why we have these books and we have this mind and we have a certain understanding of intuition and spirituality. So we rise above the animals, rise above the instincts that was tie us into our carnal desires. That is why. So no, I really believe many people from this and previous and forthcoming generations can be members of the foremost. Immortal boys will go around them, serving with cups and jugs and a glass of flowing wine, wherefrom they will get neither any aching of the head nor any intoxication. Wine. Wine in heaven. How wonderful. And no hangover. Chapter 56, verse 19. No hangover in heaven. Drink as much as you like them. And with fruit that they may choose, and with the flesh of fowls that they desire. So, chicken and duck, rabbit, well, not rabbit, but chicken and duck are there, turkey, and there will be hur. In the translation it says, fair females with wide, lovely eyes as wives for al-muttaqun. But I will come back to this part because this is not the complete translation. Like unto preserved pearls, a reward for what they used to do. No love, which means dirty, false, evil, vain talk, will they hear therein, nor any sinful speech like backbiting or rumors or gossiping, but only the saying of salam, salam, which means greetings of peace. And those on the right hand, how fortunate will be those on the right hand. They will be among thornless lote trees. What imagery! God is such a painter, such a poet. What imagery! And among talh, which means banana trees, with fruits piled one above another, and in shade, long extended, and by water flowing constantly, and fruit in plenty, whose supply is not cut off by change of season, nor are they out of reach. So now it is talked about. God has talked about the foremost. Now God has talking about those on the right hand. Verily, we have created them maidens of special creation. Oh, sorry. And on couches or thrones raised high, verily, we have created them maidens of special creations, and made them virgins, loving their husbands only and of equal age for those on the right hand. A multitude of those on the right hand will be from the first generation who embraced Islam. And a multitude of those on the right hand will be from the later generations. This is verse 40. I'm stopping here because then it starts talking about the left hand. And I'm not going to spend time talking about the left hand today. I will talk about the left hand next week for those who will sin and suffer. Twice it has been mentioned about hooves and virgins and equal age. Let me go and talk a bit about what it means. According to Ibn Kathir, in paradise there will be hur, fair females with wide, lovely eyes like preserved pearls. Therefore, God's statement, verily we have created them, meaning in the other life, after they became old in this life, they were brought back while virgin, youthful, being delightfully passionate with their husbands, beautiful, kind, and cheerful. In the book, The Message of the Quran by Muhammad Asad, he says that the noun hur rendered as companion, pure, pure companion. And it's a plural to ahwar, which is masculine, and hora, which is female, either of which describes a person distinguished by havar, which latter term primarily denotes intense whiteness of the eyeballs and lustrous black of the irises. So the translation by Muhammad Asad or Yusuf Ali and Marmaduke Pickthall is, and with them, with their companions pure, most beautiful of eye, like unto pearls still hidden in their shells, and this will be a reward for what they did in life. So the first dismissal I wanted to make was this thing about women, fair females. No, the correct distinction is companion, a pure companion. That's an important distinction, because if they're women for men, are there also women for women, or are there men for women? What is this? Is Islam purely patriarchal? Islam is sufficiently patriarchal. There's no doubt about that. And neither am I saying there's anything wrong with patriarchy. We're not going down the political route. We're looking at Islam. But a responsible patriarchal structure, which Islam promotes and, as a Muslim, I would say successfully outlines, makes sure that all members, all participating members, are looked after, valued, cherished, and revered. So obviously, us as members of the religious patriarchy would question, okay, so for the men, it's these women or their life partners who have been made virgin and young again. But what about for the women? So we would always ask them. Let's talk a bit about hur and its reference to the term regarding 72 virgins. Now, the Quran, the term hur has been mentioned quite a number of times. Several passages, always in plural form. 4 times it says in the research that I'm doing, but also in a lot of the tafsir, which is the further evaluation and study, they've been mentioned many more times. One of the things that keeps repeating, particularly when we talk about the politicization of Islam and terrorists and terror groups, there's always the idea of the 72 virgins. If you explode yourself under that building, inside that plane, in that parking area, in that public area, you will die in the name of God, and waiting for you at the gates of heaven or in your room in paradise would be 72 virgins. That is the propagated idea, whether it is propagated in the Muslim world or the critics of the Muslim world, we can further discuss. Maybe it's both. But I'll read from here. The Sunni Hadith scholar Al-Tirmidhi quoted Prophet Muhammad as having said, "The smallest reward for the people of heaven is an abode where there are 80,000 servants and 72 hur, over which stands a dome decorated with pearls, aquamarine, and ruby, as wide as the distance from Al-Jabiyah to Sana." So it's a big distance. This is in Jami al-Tirmidhi 2562, chapters on the description of paradise, and is also explained later. However, others object that the narration of granting all men 72 wives has a weak chain of narrators. This has been done. And then there's a discussion about this, about martyr, not martyr, this, that, the other. Also, with regards to, if you have these 72 virgins, why are they virgins? Why does it matter? Are you going to have sex with them? In the Quran, there's no detailed discussion about having sex in heaven or paradise. It's not the topic. It's not why it's mentioned. Let's talk about it and about the practicalities of it. Think back to 50 years ago, 60 years ago, let's say around World War II. In a lot of scientific review of how men and women make decisions, youth and fertility are factors which have retained high value in terms of men's. And I did this study particularly because I knew I was going to be talking about youth fertility. Look at it from the religious sense in Islam, Christianity, Judaism, Hinduism, even Buddhism, Sikhism. Youth fertility before World War II and even today, outside of Western Europe and North America, rare. Seems like one of your streams is having connection issues. Why is my stream having a connection issue? Which stream is having? No. What's going on? What? But I suppose I can keep recording now. It's been resolved, or maybe it was Facebook. I don't know. The network's a bit iffy today. So, even today, if you go to Muslim countries, 95 to 99% of the people, 95% plus, let's say 2 standard deviations, 95% or more of the population will have never been involved in premarital sex or sex outside of the marital home or outside of marriage. They wouldn't have done it. It has become a norm in America, England, Canada, Northwestern Europe, but you have to understand the Anglophone countries and Northwestern Europe are under 12% of the entire world. Let's say England, the UK, the US, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and all of Europe, and let's say parts of South America, excluding Brazil for now, because Brazil is a huge population. That's still 12 to 15% of the world. The remaining 85% are still countries which either have Islam or strong followers of Christianity or Hinduism or Buddhism. There are 2 billion Muslims in the world. There's around 3/4 of a billion Hindus, at least, or even more. There are large varieties of Christians, large populations, who believe in maintaining that marital relationship. Therefore, the concept of virginity, of fertility, of youth, when it comes to a religious perspective of what the partner would be, is still very important. In the West, the argument is made that women have to be virgins and so forth, but the man can do whatever. That's a whole different argument in terms of its rightness and wrongness. But in Islam and in religion, all the involved parties have to be virgins. Virginity is a virtue, and in religion particularly, and you can see a lot of arguments which can convince you of it. Islam is mostly about being married to one person. Very rare that people can manage 2, 3, 4. Being married to one person, being involved in sexual relations with that one person only, for men and for women. It never advocates for men to go around sleeping with everyone and women to be virgins and stay chaste. It values, it holds everybody's interests and values at high regard. So when it says 72 virgins, the term virgin is understandable. Of course, in the current Hollywood led, post liberal, and I would even argue depraved type of society that is taking place in a lot of countries in the world, where families don't exist anymore, where families are breaking down, communities are breaking down, societies are breaking down, people's values are always in question, people's lives are in danger, people are self sabotaging all the time. I can make a lot of arguments about how today's current society is in a much worse place than it was 100 years ago. Yes, we may not have had all the sexual freedom that we enjoy today, but I'm not convinced that that is a freedom that should be completely limitless. I'm not convinced. And I don't think you'll be able to convince me, particularly because I'm a Muslim, but also pragmatically, I'm not convinced that that is a freedom we need to have, like a complete freedom when it comes to sexual activity. We still have lines in sexual activity, obviously. Age is a line, or species is a line. We don't condone having sex with an animal, for example. Age is also another line. Infidelity is also a line. So we still have limits to it. But more and more, we start seeing people trying to dissolve those limits, and I'm never in favor of that because of what it does to the individual, but also what it does to the family structure, the community, society structure, and then the world. So the virgin point was mentioned because of this. The 72, I don't know why 72 was mentioned, because in the referral that was mentioned, it also said 80,000 servants. Why doesn't anybody have any issue with the 80,000 servants? I'm not saying that reference is true or false. I don't know enough. If it's false, then there's nothing to talk about. But because it is politicized so much and it's discussed so much, and it's turned into a misogynistic perspective, whereas it isn't, because hul means male and female, like I discussed. But mostly men go to war. Even today, where are the Russian women where are the Ukrainian women? They're being protected by the Ukrainian men who are fighting wars. So even today, physical combat, even though we encourage participation of women, when it comes down to the front lines, they're less. So because they're less, the number of martyrs with regards to gender would be highly skewed towards the men. There's nothing shocking here, or there's nothing problematic here. That's just how things are. So it would make sense for people to assume, oh, it's only for the men, but it's not. The correct translation is not. The 72 is what I would wonder. In Islam, there's a phraseology that's used, 70. So one is God loves you more than 70 times more than your mother. Now you'd say, why did God say 70? Why doesn't he love me 100 times? Why doesn't he love me 1,000,000 times? 70 is a number that is used to represent a lot. 7 is one of the important numbers of Islam. There are 7 skies, there's 7 this, there's 7 that. 7 is a very important number. So perhaps one could argue that 70 is in that table. That is why it is used. But 70 literally means a lot, many. So it could be argued that it's not exactly 72 virgins waiting for you, but it's many. On that point, why do we fight wars? Wars are started by men and women, kings and queens, prime ministers, male and female. So it's not a man thing to say, oh, men fight wars because they're men. I would never accept that premise, because both have started it. You have to give soldiers something to fight for. Sometimes they fight for king and country, queen and country. Sometimes they fight for values. Many times they fight for images. When we win, we will do this. I was watching one of my favorite movies, Troy. Troy, that came out in 2004, where Brad Pitt, um, what did he do? Brad Pitt exalted himself to play Achilles. It was one of the finest performances I've seen by him. But when the Greeks win the first day and they cover the beaches of Troy, Agamemnon, the king, is sitting, and all the other kings of the Greek kingdoms are coming and presenting him. This is a flask made by my father. This is a sword, blah, blah, blah. And every time he's saying, tomorrow we'll have supper in the gardens of Troy, and you'll be the first to walk amongst this. You'll be this, you'll be that. These are the rewards, but these are images. We fight for images. We work for images. When you go to the office, you don't go and say, oh, I'm going to the office because I really enjoy my job. Well, some may do. But you don't go saying, oh, I'm going to the office because I'm just going to look at what is, and this is all that I care about. We go because we say, it's the 2nd of December today. I'll get paid next week, and with that money, I'll pay my rent and pay this and pay that. And we imagine, and I'll be able to do this, and I'll be able to do that, and I'll be able to book that holiday I've been planning. We work in images. So for 1400 years ago, an image to give to a soldier would be of an attractive woman, a woman who you find attractive, which is in the Arab world. That's why, like pearls, eyes shaped like almond, light skin, blah, blah, blah. And many of them. That which you find attractive in a lot of quantity. What I've taken from this is this. I'm not convinced on the gender part, because the word doesn't mean just women, it means women and men. I'm not considered the 72 is a factual number. I think it means many. And I'm not convinced, and I've made the point of why virginity is mentioned, because even today, most of the world values it. In men and women. That's the important point here. I think the disparity comes when you say, oh, women should be virgin, but men have to behave like dogs. No, they don't. And they shouldn't. Virginity is valued and championed in religions. Pureness and chastity, those are valued in religion. And just because parts of the world in Northwestern Europe and North America are going into a different direction post-structuralism, after post-structuralism, that doesn't mean that the long-established structures of religion would simply crumble under that. They will contest against it, like we're seeing even today. So based on this rationalization, I don't have issue with this term, but I wouldn't say that it's correct to use it either. I wouldn't use it, for example. But 1400 years ago, or even 100 years ago, something to motivate the soldier. Like soldiers used to take a picture of their beloved, not always their wives. In World War I, World War II, they would just look at that picture or have a necklace or a locket where they look at that picture. Those things motivate you. A picture of your wife and your son. Those things motivate you. Letters. Remember, wives used to write letters for their husbands or potential husbands who would be on the battlefield, and they would read that letter 50,000 times. People who have never written a letter, people who are in their 20s or teenagers who've never written a letter, let me tell you, letters are extremely powerful. They communicate things that emails really can't. And it's not just the tactile quality. There's a lot of things that letters can do. So the point I'm making here is about inspiring the soldier to do something. And that which you find attractive, and many of it, is, I think, the argument that they were making. But I'm going to stop right here because, as you see, my voice and my throat are still quite taxed. So I shall see you next week, and we will complete this chapter next week. Have a wonderful Friday, a wonderful